Putin has done everything to make the world seriously consider the elimination of Russia as a state. Before 2022, basically no one really cared about this Russia. And the sadism of its domestic policy or its Syrian African escapades were, well, carelessly ignored. But already in 2024, and accordingly in this 2025, it became absolutely clear that a radical solution to the issue is inevitable anyway, because the Kremlin patient poses a danger to the entire global clinic. Well, right here, as soon as the conversation turned to Taurus missiles, long-range rockets, and the possibility of being buried under the ruins of the Kremlin, Russia immediately, of course, got alarmed, and it announced that it would be checking the information about Germany lifting restrictions on the range of missiles for Ukraine. And Lavrov, spewing pus and blood, bluntly stated that Germany is getting drawn into the war. Peskov is mumbling something there about Russia's peacefulness. And the scoundrel Medinsky is finishing up a rude memorandum. And the main patient, Putin himself, is moving to the very bottom, that is, to the 18th floor of his bunker. So it's clear that not only for us, but for everyone, the stench of war global and irreversible is becoming sharper and sharper. After all, Putin, with his wild hallucinations, his utter stupidity, his apparent madnesses, Trump claims us, created a situation from which there is truly no so-called soft way out, at least not for him. And this hopelessness, according to the logic of how things are developing, will only be aggravated by the increasing audacity of Kremlin memorandums, various Taurus missiles, the bloodshed at the front, Trump's wavering, and by Europe, which has finally realized the full horror of the situation. Well, we know the secret. We know that the most optimistic thing about all of this is that this is a war that could perhaps be ended with a single bullet. But somehow that bullet is dramatically delayed. And the world slaughter is becoming more real with each passing day. For Putin, obviously, the way out of the war is a catastrophe and a living burial. Because if he goes for it, he will immediately plunge into the anger and contempt of the so-called Russian people, whom he himself, Putin, has driven into a state of acute military patriotic hysteria. Well, this realization about Russia's true role in the global process has, of course, come. It is being observed in the world. It is undoubtedly present. But as always, this realization has come somewhat late. During this time, all of Putin's phobias have intensified, and immobilizing, restraining the patient has become a very complicated quest. And there is no doubt that right now, the brightest minds on the planet are racking their brains in search of this simple solution. Everyone is trying to solve this quest. The greatest necks of humanity are being scratched over solving this deadly crossword, but the time has been lost. If the United States or the leaders of Europe had a bit more depth to their thinking and their brains had been a bit better jerrified, then several years ago, 6 or 7, perhaps Putin would have been carried away from a banquet in Zurich or New York in a deep coma. And right now, Putin would be lying in a crystal coffin in the middle of the Kremlin, surrounded by tearful Patrushevs and Volodins, all trying to awaken this sleeping beauty with their little kisses. Well, this rocking in a crystal coffin, perhaps in the Archangel Cathedral, wouldn't fundamentally solve Russia's problems, would it? But humanity would have had the time and opportunity to reflect on this terrible problem without the kind of rush we see today. But nowadays, this reflection on the problem just isn't coming together at all. We know, for example, that Trump has a very influential spiritual advisor, Burns, and he has never, let's say, ever really actually been known for any kind of radicalism or particularly stood out for it. But even he, now being one of the people closest to Trump, calls Putin a well-known war criminal. In fact, and he says that Putin should receive a harsh, brutal reminder that Trump's America is not Biden's America. But I repeat, that's all there is for now. For now, these are just remarks from those around him. Trump himself, as always, has somewhat backed down, referring to some 2-week waiting period. But overall, it must be said that the group of Russia enthusiasts around Trump has significantly dwindled. And the single bullet theory, which has been known for a long time, is gaining popularity, but with a significant delay. But the entire intensity of international passions forced Russia to make its official statement as well. And so there was yet another appearance. Lavrov, the cucumber, presented himself to the people. Once again, Lavrov simply and bluntly voiced to the world the imperatives of his deranged master. Nothing new. And in addition to all the other posturing and demands and the thirst for land, the condition for what the Kremlin calls peace is an eternal ban on Ukraine joining NATO, possessing nuclear weapons, and having a capable army. And all of this, of course, is absolute audacity and at the same time, complete unreality. The fact is that by now, absolutely all of Russia's habits, its irrationality, its bloodthirstiness, its deceitfulness, its treachery are just too well known. And Russia, which forbids Ukraine from joining NATO and from having its own nuclear weapons, in this situation resembles a maniac who, while licking a bloody knife, forbids the victim from putting on the bulletproof vests, so that there is always an opportunity to stab again, and deeply. But look, somewhere over there, I have that statement from Lavrov. The pose of this old cucumber was also noteworthy. He assumed that well-known asana called the crushed spider. This particular asana is especially good for demonstrating the most vile intentions of a dying but still very, very, very venomous creature. Yeah,